It's crooked. Yeah, fuck it. Audio's probably fine, but just in case it got fucked up, yeah. Bullshit. What the fuck? Already? Oh, hey, get in there. Have a turn. Extension test. That was good. Hey, this is actually a part two to a story I read in the last VOD. So, I mean, really, you can listen to the story without hearing the first part. It's gonna be a minute until we kick it off. Wait, see, my buddy's gonna pop in. I've got him set as strange moderator. Sound like a dude, hopefully.
Does it help if I go like this? You already scrolling over there? I don't know.
Oh, what? Shoot this stuff on baseball? Nice, bro. You know anything about it?
No. They're probably on my newsfeed though. Is
Like,
Papa and I?
like on TV? You wanna look into that? Okay, Caden says that he's at Home Depot right now.
At 11 at night. Actually, I have no idea where he's at. He's gonna be there at 10:15.
Actually, yeah, he's in Arizona, so it's only like 9 o'clock for him.
I'm looking into it.
There's a KRK THV 11AK TV story on it. Apparently, U.S. Marshals were involved. I hope it wasn't an ice bust or anything like that. Yes, they went update on here.
Yeah.
Oh shit, so it's like right in front of the place on Walmart. Yeah, it fucking. I got set to where it runs them for me, so it runs them at 2 minutes. So my stream average is about fucking. I think what? 10 or 15 minutes. I don't know. Yeah, once everybody's in and shit, then we'll get the story kicked off. Caden gets back and everything gets warmed up.
You're waiting for Kate to get back from Home Depot.
Well, no, we're also smoking and shit, obviously. We're not gonna wait that long. We're not solely waiting on him to get started. Just that's the excuses. Yeah, I Googled it. The most recent one I saw was like 4 hours ago. murder rate in goddamn Little Rock and shit posted or folded like what 5? Little Rock's murder rate. Shit multiplied. You know that for a fact. I don't know. Shouldn't have let it be. It's pretty good actually. It's what we're using right now. It's able to let us sit on the bed together instead of me having to be over there in the chair and her sitting over here by herself. Makes it where we're able to sit closer together and actually share a mic because one of the biggest issues we have actually is our streams actually last a minute most of the time. These mics only have about an hour and a half battery life, so this way me and her can just split one and have the other one as a backup and swap out when this one dies. And with the tripod being there, we'd be close together and shit. So makes everything just a little bit easier. Lighting, audio. You just duck the camera.
Yeah.
Smooth.
Yeah. So apparently there's a white truck drove up, siren blaring music. We passed the house and drove by real slow and set it by the stop sign. So I don't know if it was a fuck you to us or if the preacher or the person inside
A
us.
white truck?
Yeah, it was intentional.
What kind of truck? Pickup? Like ours?
I think a little bit bigger.
Bigger? Okay. I was like, if it's a small little Chevy, body style like ours, then it's fucking suits bitch ass. That white truck I was chasing down the road that day, that was him.
I'll ask Jaden because he saw there and I did.
Yeah, we appreciate it too. The ring light and the tripod. Yo. Not a clean one.
Yeah.
She said that
What'd that truck look like? What'd that truck look like? Small?
No.
So like my truck, it'd be bigger than my truck.
Oh yeah, no, it looked like Steven's, like big like Steven's daddy's truck. Solid white.
Okay.
So that's what I was thinking. It was a big old
I was just wanting to make sure
It looked like a decent.
I was wanting to make sure it wasn't suit because he drives a little fucking white a Chevy. I think it's almost like mine.
I don't know if that was fuck you to us or the preacher man. Honestly, I don't know. It's one of us, but
Either way. Back him. They want to cause problems. We got a driveway, and once they enter, we have the right to defend ourselves. I got about a birdshot size hole for anybody's door.
what kind of beauty products?
Probably just like skincare shit, exfoliates, or acne products. I'll take some damn wife beaters. Yeah, we usually wait until about the 30-minute mark to get our shit kicked off. I don't know why you're tripping. Get on. You already know I got some ominous music for the background.
And you're gonna play Jack's Cabins?
No.
Is it?
Oh, I can play Jazz Cats for now. Cool cats and hot sax. Saxophone. Mm. Collagen peptides. Fancy. But yeah, no, the previous story, the first part, I'll give you a quick rundown real fast. There's a man who opened saying, my day's been absolute fucking shit. And that started at like 10:15 this morning, like 10,000 years ago. He's somebody who is paid by pharmaceutical companies and industries to test medicines like thyroid, fucking blood pressure, whatever the hell. Anything he had tested before that point hadn't really given him no buzzes, highs, or any major effects. This one pill that they gave him, though, slowed his mental perception of time. Like, of course, gravity itself is always going to be gravity. If I drop something, it's going to fall the same speed no matter what. But his mind, if I drop something from here, it's going to take like 2 days to actually fall. And by the time the drug had reached its maximum effect, or at least near it, he was trying to sleep it off and couldn't. So he took an Ambien, which counteracted with it. In the long run, he ended up in a subway metro with the intent to jump on the tracks and kill himself because in all the end of it, he ended up living about 8 million years in his mind. And the part two that we're reading is from the doctor's perspective. It's almost like the doctor's report. Because, they sent him home thinking, oh shit, it'll wear off in a few hours, use the residual effects to get some work done. But what they didn't consider is that the effects of the drug and shit, 3 hours almost being, a few decades. And then with the cross reaction with the Ambien, that turned into millennia. You call that a pretty good rundown?
I suppose.
I'd say big chunks of the story are mostly him trying to, one, fight the effects of the drug, two, understand them, three, find a way to function under the influence of. But there's a point where he just got so spaced out where he couldn't even move. Like, the act of blinking took, like, years. For him, if he blinked, weeks and weeks and weeks, his eyes would be closed. Weeks and weeks, slit of light. Another week, a little glimmer. Another week, he could slightly make out the ankles of people walking past him. Another week. The title of that first story was If You're Armed and at the Glenmont Metro, Please Shoot Me. And it's off of Reddit. And this one is called, hold on, let me find it. I think it's called like My Patient Lived 8 Million Years Under a Bench at the Subway Metro or something along those lines.
Take my mom next to me.
The Glenmont Metro, yeah, my bad. Yeah, my patient spent 8 million years under a bench at the Glenmont Metro.
Have a good night.
Good night. So as far as the first one, like the first part of the story, what do you think afterlife was? Not death, but how do you think life was for the man after he sobered up from that drug? Do you think he regained motor functionality of his body and shit?
Probably, but it probably freaked him out real bad because he could hear again and everything's moving so fast all around him again. And
Oh, so you think his brain would have like liquefied from overstimulation?
not liquefied, but it would have taken him a minute to get back to normal. He would have had to readjust again.
But you think in the long run he would have readapted to society and been able to perceive time as a whole again?
Probably not. He's done lived a whole.
But to say 8 million years in his brain, that was enough to like become God, create your own universe.
He'd probably be in a mental institute.
Okay, so not necessarily just full recovery, but alive and at least knowing of his own existence and consciousness. Not necessarily just being brain dead, beating his head against the wall. See, I think that it's gonna be, my hope, because I didn't get to hear his part. I tuned in when she was like, I want to do what he did. I hope that it is like a Lucy scenario. If you've ever seen that movie where there's this drug, yeah, I hope that it unlocked like a higher percentage of his brain and shit to where he's able to perceive certain limits of time that we are unable to.
I read the story, didn't you?
Like I said, I didn't hear like the first third of it that they discussed his effects and stuff. All I heard was like the second part where this lady approaches him wanting to do an experiment for the pharmaceutical company that wants to produce this drug, but they want to do a very specific study on the testing or on the drug and its side effects. So they want to do a controlled induce or whatever you want to call it to her. But the weird part is that she wants to watch somebody die while under the effects of the drug.
Like, she wants to watch someone die while she's under the effects so she can assess and stop the situation and see if that would help? Or
no,
she wants somebody who's under the effect of the drug to die while under the effect of the drug?
She wants to be under the effect herself and watch somebody die and see every single microsecond of what happens.
Exactly. That's okay.
So she...
The second one was a lot more sinister. Jesus fuck. What the hell?
This one's sinister too in the long run, because...
Well, she doesn't have to be an evil scientist. Evil?
It's not really evil scientist as much as empathy is set aside for the sake of science. So even though this patient is clearly dying on the table, the lack of empathy just due to the necessity she feels to complete the experiment. Catch her off.
So she doesn't help them survive. She just watches them die.
Oh yeah, no, she's like strapped to a chair with 8. I'm not gonna spoil too much, but
you already told me that some stuff. Never mind, you're not spoiling it for me. You're not spoiling it for me.
Yeah, let's say it's not just you this go around.
I don't think you can hear that.
jump over to Snapchat. It's just rather not make it phone vibrate over there.
Well, it's just easier to do that, and then I can see it. It's kind of like we're actually hanging out over there. You can voice your advice.
This street rock around. It's tricky. Yeah, we probably won't even be able to do all this one night.
I asked if you wanted to wait till tomorrow.
We wouldn't be able to do it tomorrow for sure.
Why not?
We're gonna spend all day doing it while Hazel comes in here and yells at us.
No, we have the 2 hours that she lays down for a nap. It's too late now.
I mean, it's too late now.
Already.
I can take the fucking log down and ditch the VOD. Yeah, but we're gonna have to break this up. For sure. Because we've got part 1, part 2, and then the final part. So unless we're really just in a flow and feeling it, I doubt we're gonna do all. Ooh. What? What? Fucking double weekend. So you sure you don't want to help me read? You don't even want to start it off. You're gonna be a straight duty head. You wonder why your parents tried to drop you off at the fire station? I guess watch the chat for me.
I'm checking every once in a while.
Every once in a while.
Yes, I'm gonna close my eyes and try to visualize.
You're trying to visualize.
Move the fan, I don't feel it.
I've got to prepare myself. Well, I want to feel it.
Bitch.
Bitch. It's on low.
Oh,
Well, then sit up and get over here.
no, we love this.
Showing your ass to the fucking stream. That's not allowed. Okay. Go pause that. It's gonna snatch my focus. I have ADHD. Go pause it.
Son of a bitch.
Nah, I just really wanted an excuse to slap your ass again.
Well, both of you.
No balls you want.
You're right. She'll hurt them.
Fury would hurt me. Scary boy, I'd catch him alone.
Fearless boy. You.
What?
Fingers. No, stop.
And that's what a real man's hand sounds like.
Stop.
Got that sandpaper.
Dang, scary boy. You feet all over the. Dude, Fury has his butt.
I guess let's get into this. No person, actually, no living thing, has experienced more suffering than clinical trial subject S-47. S-47 was a healthy male who volunteered to be a test subject for the trial of the drug called Mentavix? Try?
Looks like Mentanovox.
Mentanovox. Okay. Mentanovox typically yields mild improvement of memory and cognition. S-47 had a different reaction to the drug. I'm the research scientist who administered the dose of Mentanovox to the poor man, and I consulted with his doctors at the ER after he was found crumpled under a bench at the Glenmont Metro Station. I have first-hand knowledge of the devastating trauma that the Mentavox cross-reaction can produce, and I couldn't understand why someone would beg me to put them through what S-47 had experienced. Then I took the drug myself. Mentavox is essentially a calcium ion accelerator paired with a protein that binds to a certain dendritic neuroreceptors, and it makes signals flow faster through the brain. A lot faster. When I administered a mental speed assessment to subject S-47 30 minutes after I gave him 25 milligrams, he was able to perform incredible inhuman mental feats. He finished a 50-word search in 3 seconds, solved a maze drawn into a poster-sized paper in 2 seconds. His mind worked fast enough to catch thrown Cheerios with chopsticks. Mentavox had pushed him well into the superhuman range of thinking speeds. His mental speed was accelerating when he left our offices. I told him to enjoy the extra time he would seem to have, and since his super accelerated brain, minutes would seem like hours at the time. I thought S-47 would view the drug's effects as a positive thing. I pictured him at home, happily speed reading through books he wanted to find the time to read, and get different work done. That's what I would have done. Or so I thought. It didn't occur to me that from his point of view, just getting home from our office would seem like it took days. He must have experienced hours of perceived time just in the elevator from our office, a day waiting just for the next train, and then another day crammed inside a crowded, smelly metro car. If I had thought that while he was still in our office, maybe I would have just sent him on his way with nothing more than a Mentavox trial pamphlet. But what happened to S-47 was much, much worse than experiencing the equivalent of days on the metro. 90 minutes after I sent him home, I got a call from the ER at White Oak Hospital. A man had been found behaving bizarrely under a bench at the Glenmont Metro Station. By the time he had reached the ER, he was unresponsive. Personnel in the ER found Mentavox trial pamphlets in his pocket and called my lab. 90 minutes.
Damn, that really puts so much more into perspective.
I don't think he ever actually said the time of the last story.
Yeah, he never told us how much. He never told him after like the very beginning when to him time was because it helped with the story. At first, the passage of time was perceivable. But then afterwards, it wasn't. So we never got to know what time it was actually, because to him, it had been
So from
thousands of years.
10:15 to 11:45, this motherfucker's world was just.
Yeah.
I took a blood sample and ran an engram decay. I'm oversimplifying the neuroscience here, but basically the cells in a conscious brain continuously make new connections and tear down existing connections. But the new connections represent learning and torn down connections represent forgetting. When we sleep, cerebrospinal fluid washes away the metabolic debris from this activity. The test I ran measures how much engram decay, forgetting, has happened since the last sleep cycle. Engram decay is a good way of measuring the equivalent duration of consciousness, how long a patient has perceived they have been awake. We use this in the Metnavox trials to measure the acceleration in thinking speed. More engram decay means the subject has perceived a longer period of consciousness. S47's engram decay results were incomprehensibly large. I ran the sample 3 times to make sure nothing was wrong with the lab equipment. I got the same result each time. Subject S47's brain had ran so fast that the 90 minutes between leaving the lab and winding up in the ER, he had perceived 8 million years of consciousness. The man had been awake so long in his perceived time frame that he had forgotten everything. Literally, his mind had been running so fast that even the nearly instantaneous act of blinking would have been perceived as thousands of years of darkness. From his massively sped up perspective, his view of the metro station from under the bench must have been an eternal, unchanging scene. The near complete lack of mental stimulation he experienced, and the 8 million years of perceived time, were utterly devastating. His brain tore itself down in an act of forgetting. The ER sent me an fMRI scan. His cortex had no activity. His gray matter was essentially a collection of disconnected neurons. At the time, we had no way of knowing what caused this extreme side effect, but we noted that his blood work showed that he had recently taken a sleeping aid. We guessed that the 25 milligram dose of Metnavox, already unusually active in this subject, interacted with the sleeping drug. I compiled everything I had on S47 into a report, or compiled, my bad. I compiled everything into a report and sent it to the head office. The company pub, or the fucking hell. The company published an adverse drug reaction bulletin between Metnavox trials and the bulletin that was put on the Metnavox trial and was an indefinite hold. I would never learn what happened to S47. Wait a minute. So if the head office immediately put a hold on the drug after they took note of its reaction, then I don't think he ever fucking had, clearance for the fucking trial.
They got clearance for the trial, but after they figured out about how the first guy reacted to it because of the Ambien, they put an immediate hold on it.
So you think the fucking trial was cleared, but just
It was a trial. They were testing it. It didn't work, and or if it did, they needed to tweak it a little bit. So hopefully, other drugs like Ambien won't fuck with you and make you perceive 8 million years in the span of 90 minutes.
2 months later, I was in my office preparing for a trial of new blood pressure medication when the receptionist called. "There's a woman here to see you," and she whispered. She said she doesn't need an appointment because of who she is. I met my unexpected visitor in the lobby, a woman in her late 30s or early 40s. She wore a black business suit and had a ratty red Jansport backpack slung over her shoulder. She introduced herself as soon as I walked into the busy lobby, as if she already knew what I looked like. My name is Helen Kaizen. I work with the Department of Defense, and I need to talk to you about Metnavox. As soon as we got into my office, she pulled out a stack of papers from a backpack and dropped them on my desk. It was the Metnavox Adverse Drug Reaction Bulletin. I need you to do this to me. You want me to induce the worst adverse drug reaction I've ever heard of in you on purpose. The bulletin says that a high dose of flumizanil, the fuck, I don't know how to pronounce most of the fucking medications, but it's one that keeps you awake. The bulletin says that a high dose of whatever the fuck could potentially reverse the reaction. I want you to induce me with the adverse Metnavox reaction, and then when I give the signal, administer whatever the fuck to slow my mind back down. The bulletin says potentially, could potentially. That's two, oh no. The bulletin says potentially and then could potentially. That's two weasel words in a row. The bulletin has a mandatory future research section that they need material for. So they put in only the wild ass idea that they had. In reality, no one knows how to prevent, induce, or reverse this reaction. Okay, I read that like shit, but basically he's calling bullshit on them saying that flumezinil, I guess, yeah. He's calling bullshit saying that flumezinil would reverse the reaction because truly they have absolutely no way of knowing, and they're just haphazardly putting this fucking subject up based on a whim. I'm okay with
She's
it.
volunteer.
And she says, I'm okay with uncertainty. Why would you want to do this to yourself? For what purpose? Science. I want to watch someone die with my own eyes in extreme slow motion. I thrust the bulletin back at her. Whoever you are, Miss Kaizen, your idea of what science is and mine are profoundly incompatible. I won't help you destroy your brain. I won't participate what sounds like, to me, more like a satanic death ritual than clinical research. 6 weeks later, I found myself escorted through a security building, or through security in building G164 at Aberdeen Proving Ground. My escort, Dr. Helen Kaiser. Those 6 weeks opened my eyes to what well, or to what a truly well-connected person can accomplish. No matter how determined their goals, Dr. Kaizen had somehow gotten a national interest exemption to the Metnavox ban, and I received the original document signed by the director of the National Security Council herself. Frankly, until then, I didn't even know there was such a thing as a natural interest exemption to a restricted drug. So she went to the head dicks of head dicks and had a letter written. God fuck.
Yeah. Karen it is.
Helen. Her name's literally Helen. She has a Karen name. That's the funniest fucking part. Helen had also somehow influenced the directors of the huge pharmaceutical company that developed Metnavox. The CEO phoned me and asked to participate in Dr. Kaizen's important experiment. I asked her if he or I asked her if he knew exactly what Helen was doing. I have no idea. I don't care. Just give her whatever help she needs. Any questions? The way she said any questions made it abundantly clear that I was not to ask any questions. Of course, I did have questions. Why do I have to participate in this? Was at the top of my list, but I already received counseling letters from the HR complaining about my lack of judgment for letting S47 go home while he was still in the grip of Metnavox. I felt pressure to lay low and go with the flow, and that's exactly what I did. Helen met me in the lobby of a massive office building on a military base. When she visited me in my office, she wore a black business suit. Today, she was wearing a blue lab coat with Kaizen embroidered on the left pocket. Thank you for coming. I trust you have the drugs. I showed her what I brought. a 100 milligram vial of Metnavox HCl. She had requested that Metnavox had been compounded into an injectable form, and a box of Ambien pills. I also had a single vial of flumazenil, which, according to the hastily written adverse reaction bulletin, could potentially reverse the Metnavox cross reaction with Ambien. The guard in the lobby gave me a red badge displaying a giant letter E for escort required. Then Helen led me into the offices beyond. Helen's office was a windowless chamber with a floor-to-ceiling whiteboard covering all four walls and even the back of the door. Equations with strange diagrams featuring stars and circles and what looked like electrical engineering symbols or maybe even ancient runes. It filled the whole room of whiteboards. Helen watched me gape at the weird symbology that surrounded us. She laughed. It's just math. These, she pointed at the markings that looked like ancient runes, are just stochastic tensors. Stochastic tensors. The whole thing is just a giant problastic differential. Never mind. She thrust a clipboard of paperwork at me. Sign these, please. They're non-disclosure agreements. I worked through the paperwork while Helen rummaged around in a pile of binders and boxes in the corner of her office. You can wear this, she said. She handed me a lab coat. I handed her the signed paperwork and put on the lab coat. You're going to destroy your brain, you know. The patient who had a cross reaction was left with a completely unconnected cortex. There's no coming back from that. Thank you for your concern, but I have a plan. I sighed. This was really happening, and I was a part of it. What's the plan? I'm going to predose with the sleeping aid. I will also take 50 milligrams of dihexamine to not fall asleep, and then we wait. For what? We wait for the test subject to die. When Helen visited my office, she told me that she wanted to watch someone die. I thought this was a lone lunatic, someone who did their own research. You know what I mean? I was completely wrong. Whatever Helen was up to, it had the full support of important people. The head of frickin' NSC signed the National Interest Exemption memo, and apparently it is in the national interest to overdose Helen on experimental psychoactive drug just to let her watch someone die. I said, is this an animal study? The test subject is a human with a terminal disease. He volunteered to participate in this experiment. She turned to her desk and sorted through a stack of papers and folders. She found what she was looking for and handed me a green folder. We have the institutional review board approval for this. I know it's a little unusual, but everything that we're doing today is totally approved. I remember telling Helen that her experiment sounded more like a satanic death ritual more than a legitimate science. Now, in Helen's office, with the walls full of strange mathematical symbols and diagrams of stars inside of circles, the same thought again occurred to me. Despite all the trappings of authority and approval, I could not see how this ludicrous experiment was legitimate science. The phone rang. Helen answered with a terse yes. Whoever was on the other end Whoever was on the other end of the call spoke briefly. We will be right there, Helen said, and hung up the phone. We have to go to the capture chamber. I will explain the plan in more detail when we get there. So, she hasn't just got the head of NCS on this shit. She's got investors. She's got approval, volunteers.
Yeah.
So the dead guy on the table, he's a volunteer. It's terminal disease, so he's gonna die either way. If that makes you feel any better. You been checking shit?
Yeah,
No,
just like a second.
a second ago.
Yeah.
Alright.
You need to add stuff to put on food.
I'm gonna say that's what I need you here for. Because I'm probably just talking through ads. I don't know if anybody's here, but
You need to talk to people, but no one's here.
We marched out of her office, Helen in the lead. We wound through the halls of her second floor office suite, then into the stairwell. We descended 10 floors, through fire doors at the bottom of the stairwell, then into another security vestibule. More checking of IDs, more signatures on sign-in sheets. I put my phone in a small cubby. I was given a second badge that read "Detain and blindfold if unescorted." Shit. I said cuff him and blindfold him if ain't nobody around him. Then we passed through a glass enclosed, one person at a time man trap and into a long corridor. I'd read signs on the doors we passed. Some were normal basement corridor sorts of things, like electrical, custodial, closet, HVAC, and then the signs got weirder. Pharmacy, theology, hospice. We stopped at a door fitted with a small sign that said capture chamber. Helen entered her code into the keypad lock. I heard a lock click, and I had a sudden flash of fear, panic almost. The feeling was more than just a strong distaste of whatever Helen was doing. I sensed that whatever was behind the door was strong, not just ethically wrong or scientifically misguided, but cosmically wrong and dangerous. Helen held the door for me, and I entered the room, which I would spend the next 120 years. And it goes on to describe a few things. So the capture chamber was it was a gigantic space, like a Walmart with all the shelving removed. A flawless white tile floor reflected the ranks of hundreds of fluorescent lights that hung from the ceiling 50 feet above us. A hospital bed was positioned in the center of the raised circular platform that was in the center of the room. Even from the door, a good 150 feet away, I could tell that there was a patient in the bed. All vital signs monitor to the left of the bed, and a man sat in a metal folding chair on the right. The platform was surrounded by. I forgot about this shit. Machine. The platform was surrounded by heavy machinery. Huge cams mounted on shiny stainless steel shafts were linked to a maze of interlocking rails that surrounded the bed platform. A tangle of brightly colored cables wove through the equipment like tree roots or capillaries, giving the apparatus a look of something almost organic. Another raised platform stood outside of the ring of machinery. Instead of a bed, this platform held a black leather reclining chair that was almost oriented so that whoever sat in it could observe the test subject. At least 2 dozen computer monitors were mounted on a metal framework surrounding the chair. Helen led me to the second observation platform. The test subject, she pointed at the patient on the hospital bed, stopped oral intake 6 days ago, and we lost consciousness 36 hours ago. We are monitoring his respiration and mandibular movement. We believe he will die in the next 2 hours. Who's the man sitting next to him? That's his son. Our protocol specified that terminally ill test subjects must be comforted by one family member. Because both test subject and the family member must have top secret clearance, finding test subjects that match the protocol criteria is quite tedious. Something about the way she suggested she thought having a family member present was a waste of resource. We climbed the short flight of steps to the observation platform with the leather chair. The chair faced the center of the platform with the hospital bed where the test subject lay dying. The two huge monitoring stands holding a dozen computer monitors each stood to the left and right, framing the view of the hospital bed. The monitors flashed and flickered patterns that appeared to be random noise. Helen walked to the leather chair, and I stumbled behind, slack-jawed, trying to make sense of this bizarre experiment, whatever it was. Helen continued talking to me, oblivious to my confusion. I'm going to pre-dose with the Ambien and the dexamethasone.
keep me awake drug. The what the fuck will counteract the Ambien, so I should have no problem staying awake. We will wait until his respiration slows to about 6 breaths per minute. Then you will inject me with 40 milligrams of Metnavox. She sat in the chair, a surprisingly ordinary reclining chair. Please put the drugs here. She gestured to a small table that held a tall glass of water and a prescription bottle labeled Dexamine. Bolted to the left arm of the chair was a gray metal box that held a small garden of lights and switches. A large red mushroom-shaped button labeled Dose Now stood above all the others. Once the test subject dies, and I have observed all I will need to see, I will press the Dose Now button, and you will immediately inject me with 200 milligrams of Flumazenil. She pointed at her left shoulder. A small square of fabric had been cut out of her lab coat, exposing her shoulder. This is where you will inject the Metnavox. You will inject the Flusamil directly into my neck. It will need to act as rapidly as possible. Helen, did you actually read the bulletin about S-47? He perceived being conscious for 8 million years. His mind was gone when he got to the ER, completely devoid of cortical connections. His suffering was unimaginable. I've done the math, she replied testily. With the dosage I received, I expect to only experience 300 to 500 years of consciousness. It'll be a nice break, frankly. A nice break? Nice? 500 years? Years of just sitting in this chair, watching a corpse while these monitors flash noise at you. Those monitors are displaying reading material. That one, she pointed at the upper left, a bank of crazily flashing screens, is displaying a Wikipedia page at a rate of 500 pages per second. The one next to it is scrolling through 20,000 words of English literature at 500 pages per second, and so on for the rest of the monitors. News archives, scientific publications, social media, and so on. We bought special monitors with 500 hertz refresh rate just so we can display information fast enough. I stared at the two banks of flashing screens. I couldn't perceive anything but painful, bright flickering. You're going to read for 500 years while you observe that poor man over there and catch up on a few emails. She rotated a computer keyboard out of a slot of the armchair. Let's get ready, shall we? She produced a headset from the pocket of her lab coat and put it on her head. This is Helen Kaizen. This is the audio record of Observation Activity 54. Observation 54? How long has she been watching people die in this bizarre room? Helen continued talking into her headset. Current time is 14:23. I am pre-dosing with 1 Ambien and 50 milligrams of Dexamine. She popped an Ambien out of the blister pack, downed it with a swallow of water, and she took 2 pills from the dehexamine bottle and swallowed them. Now, she said, turning to me, we wait. She pressed a few keys on her keyboard, and one of the monitors in the right bank of the screen stopped flickering and instead displayed a standard computer desktop background. Helen clicked on the icons and slid windows around the screen. When she was done, the screen had held 3 windows. At the top of the screen was a data strip slowly updating graphs of what I assumed were the test subject's vital signs. Blood pressure, respiratory rate, blood oxygens, and so on. Below that was Helen's email box. 1,478 unread items. And a word processing below open to a blank page. Or a word processing window open to a blank page. I understand that once the Metnavox kicks in, audio energy will be untenstuated by the point where I cannot hear anything. I will not have enough fine muscle control or breath control to speak, so I will type my observations and anything else I need to communicate here. She pointed to the mouse cursor, moved the mouse cursor to the word processing window above. Keep an eye on it as we proceed. It's the only way I have to communicate. We waited. Helen ignored me while she read and wrote emails. The patient's respiration slowly decreased. I wandered off the observation platform to get a closer look at the machinery surrounding the patient. Stay away from that area, Helen shouted at me. I'm going to start the capture sequence soon. There's a lot of mechanical hazards present when it's operating. Feeling like a chided child, I sought into the short flight of stairs leading to the platform with the hospital bed, aside from Helen. No, aside from Helen, the dying man and his son were the only two people in the huge room, or chamber, whatever. This head subject was an emancipated man who looked to be at least 90 years old. He slept. Rather, he was in a state of unconsciousness that did not look at all restful. His bony, withered body barely made a dent in the soft mattress of the hospital bed. Bruises up and down both arms betray a long battle with disease that required a lot of intravenous medicines. "Hey," I said to the son, a middle-aged man sitting next to the patient. He looked up from the book he was reading before he could speak. Helen shouted across the chamber, "No communication with personnel on the test subject platform." The patient's son rolled his eyes and whispered to me, "Helen's a bit of a stickler for protocol." I nodded in agreement and wandered back towards Helen on the observation platform. I walked about, examining but failing to understand the machinery surrounding the test platform. I stared at the flashing banks of screens, and trying and failing to perceive even a single second of content. I stood behind Helen and superstitiously read a few of her outgoing emails. Subject: risk of analysis of portal capture experiments. Subject: military benefits of applied theological research. Subject: time card failed full check. Helen glanced back at me with a glare that clearly communicated she did not appreciate me reading her emails over her shoulder. I returned to strolling around the perimeter of the room. An hour passed, then another. I thought about Helen's plan to spend centuries of perceived time in this room. I'd only been here 2 hours and was desperately looking forward to getting the hell out. To spend multiple lifetimes here, to look forward to spending lifetimes here, that was a sign that Helen was different. "It's time," Helen shouted at me across the room. I jogged the observation platform. Helen had already prepared the injection of Metnavox. On the far platform, the son was standing over the bed holding his father's hand. Helen was speaking into her headset when I got to the top of the stairs. "Blood pressure is dropping, respiratory rate is down to 6. The probability of death within the next 10 minutes is over 90%. Starting the portal stabilizers." She flicked a few switches on the control box that held the dose now button. A klaxon blared. A red cop car style light on the machine started flashing, and the apparatus surrounding the patient slowly came to life. The motors hummed, rising pitch. Shafts turned faster and faster, their cams pushing the strange grid of beams up and down. The fastest moving parts of the machine started to glow and flash, giving it almost the look of a carnival ride. The machine spun and gyrated faster and faster. The grid of the glowing beams blurred. The machine kept accelerating and the seemingly random flashes became synchronized, with the movement of the grid beams resolving into a glowing five-pointed star inscribed in a circle that looked in crazy, unpredictable ways. All the shit from the walls. "Capture device trim active. Dosing with Metnavox now." Helen spoke into her headset, and then she handed me the syringe. "Dose me with the Metnavox, and then stay on this platform and watch my log entries, and what happens when I press the dose now button. 200 milligrams of Fluzamil in the neck. Yes, prepare the injection now. There must be absolutely no delays when I press the button." I took the syringe of Metnavox from her. "You're probably not going to survive this, you know. You will suffer terribly for what you perceived as centuries. Eventually your mind will tear itself down in a catastrophic act of forgetting. I'm aware of risks. Now inject me." I did. Helen was quiet for a minute. She looked at the patient on the far platform, and she stared at the flashing computer monitors. Then she snapped her head to face me and said, "I think it's starting to take effect." She blurted the words out almost too fast for me to hear. Your perception is definitely accelerated, maybe about 10 times faster. Helen turned away from me so fast that she almost fell out of her chair. She darted her hands to the computer keyboard and typed. The key presses sounded more like a drum roll rather than a human using a keyboard. I can hear you, but your voice is slowed down and frequency shifted. I cannot understand. I will communicate through the screen. Please type your response to me here. I leaned over to the keyboard and typed. How long does it seem to take for my pen to fall? I stepped in front of Helen. Her eyes were darting about in a frenzy. Her gaze oscillated between me, the computer monitors, and the patient on the far platform. I pulled a pen out of my pocket and dropped it onto the floor. Helen drumroll typed her response. Days to fall. Sound is gone. Time to get to work. Helen did exactly what she said she would do. She jerked her head back and forth between screens, reading whatever information they were flashing at her, and she opened emails and slammed text into the response window. Occasionally, her eyes would linger onto the patient in the center of the whirring machinery. She had returned to the frenzy of reading and writing within seconds. 3 minutes ticked by, and I tried to calculate how long she perceived those 3 minutes to be. In the quarter second of my pen drop, it seemed to take days. And then each second that ticked by would seem to be about a week. 3 minutes would be over 3 years. I watched her closely. She didn't appear to be suffering. She could push the dose now button at any time. But so far, she had not chosen to. Her pattern of frenzy motion and typing suddenly ceased. She fixed her gaze on the patient for a second. 2, 3. These few seconds were weeks of her time. Helen shot fingers to the keyboard again. This time, she typed a message in the journal window. He's dead. Chaos broke out. A moment after Helen typed the message, the vital signs on the monitor threw up a red warning message. Respiratory, 0. Heart rate, 0. So she effectively was able to call his death before the machines. You ever fallen asleep?
No.
You liar.
Those just shit chat thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna ask how much longer because there was 14 minutes last time we checked.
What do you mean how much longer?
So the next day.
16 minutes. So it's done right now. You suck at this. Well, the VOD is going to be cool. I'm not going to stop for ads in it. So effectively, she's dosed herself, and it took effect like that. Within minutes of her taking the dose and him dropping his pin, it was already taken days for it to fall. She was able to type out the man's dead, which, note, the time it took the doctor to read that, perceive it, process it, still would have been a day or two for her time. So she effectively saw that man die roughly, I'd say 3 days in her time prior to his actual death. Honestly, fucking crazy. Yeah, 4 minutes since last ad. Helen's hands raced over to the control panel in a blur. Flicking switches and turning dials, the churning satanic carnival ride of a machine came to an abrupt stop with a screech and a bang. The floor shook as the foundation of the building absorbed the forces involved in bringing tons of Rewind. The floor shook as the foundation of the building absorbed the forces involved in bringing tons of spinning and thrashing metal to an instant stop. The circle and star shape glowed brighter than ever, held fixed by a strange angle by the frozen machine. In the same instant, the patient's son screamed in pain. He fell to the floor. No, it wasn't that simple. I looked closer and saw that he didn't fall. His legs collapsed under him. They bent like they were made of rubber or melting plastic. His legs continued to melt until his torso sat on the platform in a pool of red goo. The man tried to scream again, but the severe trauma, or whatever it was that ruined his legs, started to take effect on his abdomen. With his diaphragm destroyed, screaming was impossible. So was breathing. Every instinct in me urged to run to the door, to get out of that room. But I had a duty to administer the antidote to Helen. I would not be responsible for another person going through what S47 did. Helen hammered out another message. He's taken his second death in the portal. Dose yourself with Metnavox now, or you will die. I had no idea what the first line of Helen's message meant. Second death? Portal? Those words had meant nothing to me, but the second line, I understood. There was no way I would dose myself with that drug. To live 1,000 lifetimes in this bleak underground facility? I'd rather die. On the far platform, the son of the man who apparently died 5 seconds earlier continued to dissolve. His chest splashed apart like a breaking water balloon. His head and arms fell into the puddle that his body had made, floated like a horrific pool toy for a moment, and then melted away. I had seconds to think about what Helen had wrote. Take the drug and live. He took his second death in the portal. What would happen to me if I didn't take the Metnavox? Would I be literally liquefied like the sun on the test subject? As bad as that looked, it would be far better than 8 million years of sensory deprivation like that of S47's experience. And what the hell did second death mean? Where I had only seconds to think, Helen in her hyper-accelerated mental state had the equivalent of days to decide what I should do, to decide what she should do to me. I turned to the screens to look at Helen. She was staring at me, studying me, with unblinking eyes. For her, every single micro-expression that flashed across my face, every single change in my body language, would be an hours-long process. She probably knew what I was going to do before I did. I was not going to take that drug. Helen rose from the chair before I could even nod my head to signal no to her. Her proprioception system was running 10,000 times faster than mine. With that kind of disconnect in mind-body control, moving would normally be nearly impossible. Helen discovered this problem as she tried to stand up. She misjudged the force required and literally threw herself from the chair. In another setting, her fall to the floor would have been comical. But she launched herself in a twisting arc. Her legs and arms flailed about wildly, but she was unable to control her fall. She landed face first on the platform and continued to thrash her limbs around uselessly for a few seconds. From her warped perspective of time, her fall must have taken a day or two. These futile efforts on the floor occupied a week of her time. Helen discovered this problem Whatever else Helen may be, it's pretty clear that she's smart as hell. She can figure stuff out and learn quickly. That's exactly what she did on the floor. She froze, then methodically began moving one limb at a time. She lifted one leg, then let it drop. She brought her other knee to her torso. She then pushed herself up onto her elbow and steadied herself with her right arm. She then rose. For a moment I thought she was going to fall again, but her movements this time were more controlled, purposeful. She had learned how to move under the influence of Metnavox. Blood ran from her mouth and nose where she had smacked her face on the floor. Her glance at the far platform, the test subject's son, was still busily liquefying. Then she turned towards me. Her movements were more like a bird's rather than a human's. A sequence of blindingly fast motions punctuated by short intervals of motionlessness. She moved sideways with a lurching twitch, and then grabbed the syringe and vial of Metnavox from the table next to her chair. Her eyes continued to burn into mine as she stabbed the needle through the seal of the vial and filled the syringe. No, I shouted, was useless because she couldn't hear. But fear had decoupled my mouth from my brain. Panic and terror replaced all other thoughts. I turned to run. I started to turn anyway. Helen had hours to watch me slowly shift my posture and start to engage my muscles. She lunged at me, perfectly anticipating where my neck would be. When her arm reached me, for her physical struggle, it must have been an intellectual activity like chess, not a physical endeavor like fighting. In the split second I tried to get away, she analyzed my face for saw small ways my body had telegraphed what I was going to do, and then calmly made a plan to stop me. Despite my attempt to duck and dodge, she stabbed me in the neck with the needle. Even though her attack was lightning fast, she managed to inject the Metnavox directly into my jugular. I was already off balance trying to duck her attack with the needle, but or when I was already off balance trying to duck her attack when she slammed the needle into me. I fell hard to the floor. Actually, no. I started to fall towards the floor, but the massive dose of the drug injected directly in my neck took effect almost instantly. All sound dropped in pitch and then died away entirely, as if the soundtrack of life was a vinyl record that suddenly stopped spinning. The world froze before I hit the ground. In one instant, I was struggling like mad to get away, and in the next instant, I was frozen in mid-fall, like a bug fossilized in amber.
Metaphors are for metaphors. It's metaphors.
Are you falling asleep?
Yeah.
Are you lying?
No, I'm still listening to you. Like I said, sometimes it helps.
No, that's the end of part one.
Should we end it there?
Should we?
Probably.
Probably.
We'll make a part two tomorrow.
Part two.
Yeah. And then a part two, part three.
What the hell?
Here's never anticipated how long.
You're getting up all on me on stream. Ah! 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 Flipping it. No. Yeah. We're already at an hour 20. This mic probably ain't got much more life on it. Anybody who catches the VOD, I guess, drop a follow if you anticipate the live tomorrow. We're going to be doing part 2 of the My Patient Spent 8 Million Years Under a Bench in the Glenmont Metro. We just finished up part 1, and it seems that this doctor has practically been forced into this science experiment. It seems more like a satanic ritual. And now he is physically forced under the influence of the drug he created.
Is it a man?
It's a man. The doctor is a man.
I've been thinking that.
The
Both of them is men.
no. The doctor is a man. The fucking assistant, Helen Kaiser, that's a woman. Yeah, that's why I was wanting you to help me with voices and shit, because it's just a back and forth between a man and a woman, so that really would have helped with the stories. But no, you're not cool enough. Yeah, if y'all anticipate the next one on this, drop a follow, turn on that notification. I have no clue when we'll be doing it tomorrow, whether it be in the afternoon or the night. I want to make this bitch do it.
Bitch.
What?
Bitch.
Bitch? Bitch. You want to do the thing?
Bye.
Bye.
I don't know what you want me to say.
Something.
If it's your birthday, happy birthday, says Papa